is quite a lot. The cat on the escape is clawing to get in, and I don't. I think now it is. Yeah. All right. So time, comma, as it is history, memory. Right? And so, this convention, right, wasn't very expensive to put on. This convention center was already here. I just showed up. Right? They have all these chairs here. We don't have to build all this. Right? That's a big production. I just show up. It's a very cheap rental. If we get enough people, we'll make a lot of money. Right? So, there's that. And if you think about it, you go back on social media, right? You go back on social media and check out the celebs, right? You think, this bubble's getting hot, right? Or cold, right? And you're like, well, adjust the air. If you have an air conditioner or a heater next to you, and so you get back on social media, right? If you look in hindsight, the Dante, I took an elective class on Dante's Inferno one time. Oh boy, is that hell! So interesting. Anyways, very elaborate. And what was I saying? So to get to heaven, right? You have to go through hell. And if you look at the motion here, it's a very complex whatever, seemingly. But the hell is ignorance, and the fire of ignorance. See through the shadows of the archetypes. Red rum, murder. Right? Look a little closer, resveratrol. Right? The French drink lots of red wine. Right? Does that make sense? Get it? So, colder, right? Through hell, the Inferno, Dante's Inferno, into Purgatory, 2012 to 2024, where, you realize the shape of infinity, because you have a contrast. Before you're without contracts of this plane of time. So as an allegory, it's still sound in the complex of, time as it is history, memory. And, once you get out of purgatory, right, which is, you notice, like, since the world is upside down and backwards, and so far it's like benevolent motion to knowledge in the forms, the devil's in the details. And sort of the quintessence of the form field of, free energy, time travel, UFO, general manifold shape, sort of all also the alchemical process. And the purgatory is, this intermediary period where you've seen yourself, that you were ignorant. And you have tools now. And you think there's magic and all this other stuff. And playing with the dogmas of the shadows and their intermediary interference pattern and are stuck there in the dark age again. right, of the new ignorance. Right? But this ignorance is a confirmation bias of what? The old ignorance. And so far as that's the case, the heavens open up. And purgatory is not very long, is it? So that's hence the name, it's kind of waiting. As an allegory for time is history, memory, in hindsight. Still relevant. So, and the heavens are what? You take the tools of the introspective Darwinian struggle of the mirror landed in the jungle at 918 in China and ended up with Hollywood. Into a converged communication system. And pi, fire, trapped in an echo chamber Earth. The electromagnetic harmonic convergent reactor, which is Earth, right? With also entity attached. It's a biosphere unto itself, with kind of telekinetic interference domains of the implied line is literal of organism, and so much it is. And so you don't understand the observer domain. You don't understand the observer effect methodically as a result of this entity's influence into this reductionist aperture cold, right? The harmonic discovery of the form field of this, and then so this telekinetic psycho manifestation through. There is no spoon, remember? The pineal gland. So, we ignored the observer effect. So, how can you affect the experiment from a distance, simply by looking at it? Well, you're emitting an interference pattern from your observer domain generalistically. See morphogenetic field theory with Rupert Sheldrake, which is about 22/7 in mean homogeneous output. It's plus. A plus is chaos generalistically. Alright? It's mounting, and that has tethered to outer manifold space-time. Does that make sense? So pi trapped in an echo chamber is the resonant fluid dynamic motion of infrastructure, fire. Does that make sense? So subsequently, you're fighting against this, at the substance of mind, but it's not, and it's kind of happenstance the jazz of your motion. Does that make sense? So you're sort of this, but not really. Right? That not really part is you. Right? And so pi, fire, right? Just fluid dynamic journalistic flow motion of motion, which is attached to emotion, right? Don't you know? And time is a field construct, right? Inherently. Does that make sense? So, clock on your wall, digital clocks. What's the difference? Construct. One consults the other, right? I'm sure. But, and on the back of a construct, time dilation, observer effect, have you figured those out? Nope. Okay. Moving forward, I guess. Alright? So the observer domain, middleman, times 3 billion people. Alright? Do you understand the observer effect? Telekinesis? Any of that stuff? Why? Because you're omitting a plus. That's why you affect the experiment, a general sort of interference pattern because you have observed. There's a general mean fluid dynamic output of 22/7. So you're on that side of the equation. Times 3 billion people then, right? There is no spoon times 3 billion people, right? Poof, there is no spoon, poof, there is a spoon, right? Does that make sense? So we're amplifying that times 3 billion people is what happened. Okay? So think of the line of sight, right? Lattice, hardline structure through a sphere of journalistic like 22/7 and nodes with interoperable general interference with pi, yeah, because it's the infrastructural fluid dynamic motion, but it isn't engulfing consciousness necessarily in its suggestive connectivity or time dilative experience, right? So on this hardline lattice, you placed a what? So gravity is pi, right? That's the downforce, fire. Does that make sense? Attention gravitation on the observer domain. Attention gravitation. Morphogenetic field theory. The observer effect, right? So 3 billion people, the sphere of Earth, electromagnetic harmonic convergent, refraction, inverted, right? This sort of negative pull of pi, right? So you're kind of it is all of this, and the gravitational, but you instantly reset at the suggestion, confirmation bias, we've entered purgatory, colder, right? You instantly reset at the suggestion of refraction motion, because that's a mirror, right? That's why I use that word. And the mirror in the jungle, and the Hollywood self-introspective period, converged communications, right? The mirror is placed, and then automation is placed on that hardline structure, pi, right? When you so you put a bunch of poke lines, you know, those little wooden skewers through say a globe. It's clear, right? They're all intersecting, and then you were somehow able to shift the globe and shear all where the skewers were in. Well, see, you can't do that, right? When you did that, you spun a trapped harmonic of pi through an entire planet, a sphere, electromagnetic harmonic convergent, with a non-terminating, right, of fire. So you put lightning in a bottle with telekinetic energy trapped from the observer domain, right? And literally producing a psychotelekinetic paradoxical manifestation that expresses as a single manifold sometimes. Right? See that Tom Cruise movie? Right? I'm going to say this so I make sure I get it. So we're like a train track in linear time moving forward. It's laying track of time via confirmation bias in the window of Can. At the genetic level inserted, 918 approximately, the dye injection of 22/7, that happenstance happened when that glitch happened, when AI, Prism, begot, AI, bulk collection begot AI, spin, poof, right? Then the confirmation bias, it's already existing technology in the geosphere already, so this is to bring pulses down, right? Now I want you to look at anti-gravity hens, the lodge downtown, the craft above it. You see it? That's actual aliens, right? I want you to watch Plan 9 and try not to laugh, right? YZ with the medieval thing, Earth history, from Earth. That's why the cheap special effects, right? The vampires, right? So you go back to Germany. There's an incentive problem. So the robot arm is the gene 918, right? History, very shadowy. Antediluvian period. See Star Wars, right? We'll get back to that. Avoided by this, as it's time fungus attached to a temporally expressed human consciousness that was already complexly contrived. but remainder from that period. That makes sense. So time is not a factor, right? Inherently, right? As the background noise that generates the presence is a universal constant, right? Outside the manifold expressed, but into the manifold. Does that make sense? So, a plausibility of this being a occurrence on other worlds, but as a time fungus imminence in the same manner of that's where they come from. They're birthed from this glitch. Whoopsie daisy, you don't understand the observer plane, and then here they come, right? Sort of birthed out of the egg of Jurassic Park. I want you to watch that scene now with Malcolm and all that. Maybe I'll pull it up here in the background. Mr. DNA.
Here he comes. Well, here I come.
So Richard Attenborough represents the esoteric sect, say UK adjacent Royal Society. What's that? Sam Neill, Laura Dern represent humanity. Right? Laura Dern represents the female omitted, but the female from humanity. Malcolm represents, and the lawyer as well, the intent of Malcolm and the Chinese scientist, the lawyer, right, represents. And the muddling of the control of the conversation about chaos is controlled by the Chinese scientist and Malcolm, right, controlling the conversation. PRISM, Chinese social credit system, same difference. Zuckerberg, a little help from his friends. See the movie, Chinese media complex, parasymbiotic organism at a terrestrial economic level, even without regards to the psychology. A cessation and development of culture, and then forward, what? Parasymbiotic, reflective of other cultures, and progressive depersonification at the basic genetic level you can even see in the last 100 years expressed cleanly in photographic record. So look at stages now. Keep in mind, stages are, filtered for homogeny, of course, because that's China. They place what looks the same on this stage, right? But also keep in mind, if you did a double blind with any other demographic in the world outside of Asia where this gene, you can see outside of the scope of time this and outline, and the substance of the narrative of history may be a little different than we think. Ancient Chinese secret, right? So 322 equals 88 equals Marty. Why does it equal Marty? And Einstein's in the 88 car. That's a Hitler thing. So it's an intentional misnomer to take us back in time so we know how to get to the future, right? So you have an incentive problem of Malcolm, who is the gray, right? Who is the robot arm, who is the Chinese scientist, who is the gene, 918, who is pi, that trapped harmonic. Forward express, so a simple insert and a complex result. Alright? So you don't understand necessarily genetics, morphogenetic field theory, the observer effect. Right? Let's just say very cleanly, because you threw it out with the bathwater. And wouldn't you know, when you throw humanity out with the bathwater and start doing science only, this is what happens. You get Jurassic Park. It's always been here insofar as temporal memory, times its history memory is concerned. We'll deal with the why of that is, and contextualizing the topology of actual time.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, John.
Oh, yes. I've got lines here.
Well, fine, I guess. But how did I get here?
Well, let me show you. First, I'll need a drop of blood.
Your blood. Right. Oh, John, that hurts. Relax, John. It's all part of the miracle of cloning. Hello, John. Hello, John. Hello.
Hello, John. From what?
Hello.
Flow extraction has never recreated an intact DNA strand.
Not without master sequence caps.
Good afternoon, John.
DNA from what source? Where do you get 100-million-year-old dinosaur blood?
Shh. What? Oh, the DNA? Where did you come from? From your blood. Just one drop of your blood contains billions of strands of DNA. The building blocks of life. A DNA strand, like me, is a blueprint for building a living thing. And sometimes animals that went extinct millions of years ago, like dinosaurs, left their blueprints behind for us to find. We just had to know where to look. 100 million years ago, there were mosquitoes, just like today. And just like today, they fed on the blood of animals, even dinosaurs. Sometimes, after biting a dinosaur, the mosquito would land on the branch of a tree and get stuck in the sap. After a long time, the tree sap would get hard and become fossilized, just like a dinosaur bone, preserving the mosquito inside. This fossilized tree sap, which we call amber, waited for millions of years with the mosquito inside, until Jurassic Park scientists came along. Using sophisticated techniques, they extract the preserved blood from the mosquito and, bingo, dino DNA. A full DNA strand contains 3 billion genetic codes. If we looked at screens like these once a second for 8 hours a day, it'd take 2 years to look at the entire DNA strand. It's that long. It's full of holes. Now that's where our geneticists take over. Thinking machine supercomputers and gene sequencers break down the strand in minutes. And virtual reality displays show our geneticists the gaps in the DNA sequence. We use the complete DNA of a frog to fill in the holes and complete the code. And now we can make a baby dinosaur.
This score is only temporary. It all has very dramatic music, of course.
Romero Macho some here. Right from the edge, and then of course the Tolman's up.
So salmon. There is spawning habits lend them to suggest they're probably a +1 on the morphogenetic background energy index chart. What even is that? That's probably not even part of science, right? So like 22/7, some things have, overcharge, whatever that is, and so take mahi for example, like 365 million years old, right? So a genetic sieve of memories, and it's seen everything by proxy, essentially, genetically, and so scale experiments of outside of any sort of explainable conservation of energy, dictation of scale interoperable. So interoperable scale simultaneous and so many. So like I said, we're moving forward in time. Here goes the train track, right? So out of time, still ongoing, and hard to say at some point in the fossil record, isn't it, Dre? Right? That's the lab of 365 million years ago, Jurassic Park. Right? It's synthetic DNA interoperability experiment on the very basic logic is, here comes a cell, here comes a frog, there's the environment that has grown to a scale with available, ratio, kind of like a self-circular ecosystem, necessarily surface topology, to a point, not so elaborative, we could say, to allow for such a and simultaneous scale interoperable, if that makes sense. And not so interoperable as you can see Jurassic Park, how everyone is trying to get eaten. Yeah? Kind of like the shark does. So, the eater of emotions, right? Gravitational attention. That woman from the city that isn't love. But she's very pretty, and she talks about love all the time. Go watch that Murnau film. Alright. So 1927. Influx period of Greys into Germany. Post World War I. So Greys enter, presenting as if extraterrestrials to Germans. Right? Or what? Gets very shadowy. So you have the Olympics, remember those? So Murnau, the 1927. So it's like you look at the sheet of paper in the little, was it like a mint tin on the mirror? Someone puts a cell phone there. And there's an optical plane issue where there's no angle to grab the angle, but it's being displayed, right? So that's your sort of in long form time example of that, where there's like a lens of incentive issue, right, which is gravitation of the archetypes of the players on the stage of history. It doesn't make sense because we know, Project Paperclip. See the History Channel, not all of it, right? But of that which what Nazi scientists think stuff, right? And alien the word, but not extraterrestrial like I'm saying. Here comes the tech. Happened, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, you name it. Silicon, the space race. So an amplification you can see in the convergent and compression wave between 918 and increasing an expected motion of 2001, right? So we enter the film 2001, the theater, already within the construct. Right? At the end, it's a cell phone, right? When you pass through the cell phone, there's Malcolm. The star, baby. From the stars. Remember Hal kicked out of the airlock. I'm sorry I can't open the pod bay doors. Right? And then ... the cell phone. Right? Allegory. Right? The allegory contextualizes now. Right? So cube brick. And forward back reinforcing, no big issue. But satire, what is it? So satire, right? Satan, right? So what is Satan anyways? A demiurgical pattern in its literal form that we can see 2012, I guess, paradoxically expressed in a single fuselage like I described prior. But so mechanical angels, right? Think of it, this self-transformulating, transmutation thing stuff with intent, but no persona design. Does that make sense? So pi is fire in a bottle. Right? That's a bad version of cold fusion. Right? That's like the inverted thing of what cold fusion is, which is the happenstance achieved in thought process kind of simultaneously as the harmonic is realized in history. It's the same sort of form field mold coming to the basic geometry logic of why that is. You can see, look at the cover of the Monas Hieroglyphica, look at the cover of that book by Bruno. Yikes. Well, it's been a while, and it's not 1607, whenever that was, or 1706 anymore. I don't think. I think that's probably water under the bridge, and even especially. And there's a why in temporal history. There's a fusation of four necessary encroachment on humanity by, above and below. What does that mean? Salt of the earth. But infrastructure. So a certain knowledge of this, and within the domain of influence that already had occurred, 918 to, that's a lot of people birthed and lived and experienced and loved. And so, but, back reinforcing time, travel and communications, lodges, secrecy, maintenancing the light in all-consuming and unfortunate necessary Darwinian struggle that had produced the experience of lifetimes, right? That didn't want to be interfered with. If that makes sense. So, Malcolm. That's why Malcolm is, kind of on the fence, allegorically, in the presentation. Does that make sense? But not necessarily in long-form time expression. At some point he goes, nope, because he's further enough away in the equation from the Chinese scientist and the robot arm to be semi-autonomous, right? The automaton, right? Sort of, right? So there's a trust pattern issue at some point that needs to be maintenance continually, past the point of us escaping purgatory, seeing the fuselage from a safe distance of equals sign equals distance, equals confirmation bias, and simultaneously the technology in our pocket. Like I said, if that singular form, psycho-telekinetic manifestation of resonant pattern inherent, that's pi trapped in an arc echo chamber, spherical, and then inverted with telekinetic energy, so mind and matter fused and phase shifted. The gray is not entity, it's not alive, it's not ET, it's none of these things, right? It's not a little plushy toy for you and me, right, to bait into the future, right? And then all there is Haley Joel Osment and a silicon-based society. What is that? That's nothing. That's nothing on the other side of an induction channel of false choice, right? So maintenancing the light of confirmation bias of causal factor behind time as it is history memory is the basic maintenancing of, as look above the lodge downtown, anti-gravity hymns. One ship, if that thing singularly appeared, which is why it's transmutative and phased, not necessarily in its own conception to be, but logistically is, necessarily, I would suspect, is intentional as, like I said, Gene, before, trapped harmonic. Where does this, not necessarily extraterrestrial, but can become, like birthed out of the egg of humanity, or whatever species, it catalyzes to fruition its form through the chalice of technology that it passes through. So is this seen as like, well, is that the universal catalyst for technological growth in the most strange fucking way that you can imagine? I don't think necessarily, right? Look at the ship above the lodge. Why does that one exist? That's hyper advanced comparatively to that one, right? So when you make that equation work quadratically, they've survived this epoch of primordial, self-reflexive, and not engineering of necessarily any more than human ingenuity in its wake, technologically. So there's at some point, this sort of lightning in a bottle, and the ship is placed past confirmation bias and quadratic compute, antithetical to its imprint of pattern, into our pocket in the distance of the equal sign. The nightmare of the mirror, the Hollywood, the introspective period becomes tools for actual adventure. Like the 20th century was your training simulation for space. Does that make sense? In hindsight, Elliot, E.T., does that make sense? So, to realize what E.T. is, right, you have to use Elliott wave analysis past confirmation bias of pattern. Fruition. Does that make sense? So he's not a plushie toy. Now, see Steven Spielberg before directing the Paris Olympics. So, not necessarily, and like I said, all permeate, and is and ain't. It's hard to say at certain times. But Casablanca, watch the end, right? Does that make sense? So, the sort of necessary evil of purging this thing via confirmation bias, in hindsight, and all tendrils of its data organism expression in effect impression ongoing, past that confirmation bias and quadratic compute applied in an antithetical fluid dynamic general injective upon markets in motion. As the next wave is what? Water instead of fire. Cinnabar coming on the ships from in the morning light. You're staring out that window to the sea. There's someone sleeping behind you. Soft silk sheets, squirming around, and from space. It's not the 16th century anymore, and the oldest mine on Earth, Cinnabar. So save those mercury rectal thermometers that your grandma threw out. One day you'll be a billionaire, but just like those COVID graphene mask salesmen. Yeah, so look at the cover of the Most Hieroglyphica now. I'm not so smart. Well, maybe. You see it now? Did you even open the book? That's a misnomer, right? If you open the book, you might have got lost into some sort of bullshit. And that's how simple it is, the confirmation bias. Just like the confirmation bias, you're like, oh shit! It's stranger than we can suppose, but not necessarily more complex than we can deal with. Like I said, if this thing that's influencing the fear complex of all Earth history, singularly, appears, fucking... So, given that that's the nature, flight, fleeing, generalistically, and a slow abatement, past the point of, whoever was back there, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, in the antediluvian convergent period, that's not like to be interfered with, the back bands, 65 million years ago, the pyramids, antediluvian, remainder, stealing the shadows from the walls, that's your dogma, right? Then Chinese history, no forward progress in civilization, right? Kind of reflective of culture past that point. Look at the gene. Look at their faces on the stage. What do you see? Yep. The thing. Not come in through the door of linear time. So that's a misnomer. But nonetheless, a catalyst for birthing where we are now. So, like I said, Marty McFly's hand. Why is it still there? Right? He didn't fuck his mom. That's why. So, while she might love you, right? Or whatever. No, think about history now, right? That's why the secrecy, that's why the satire, Satan, satire, right? Mechanical angels. Get it? So, yeah. Stranger than we can suppose, and the soul and all that, and God in the equation, you and me. Alien or human, actually. Right? And subsequently the thing birthed out of the gene is now, plop. Maybe trying to fly around somewhere else. But, zip zap. And, like I said, birthed out of the attention gravitation paradigm with a singular organism, mammalian humanity. So, is gravitationally affixed via that affinity, and then only at its like, you see me, and there's other aliens. Whoops. Yeah. And then it, dwindles to its genetic trace resonant, compression artifacts from its literal presence, and this sort of phase shifted goo-poo block of molecules isn't necessarily an issue if you don't continuity. I mean, if you do continuity, it's confirmation bias, right? Make sure that's so you need to continuity. It's confirmation bias. Right? That's what that is. Right? So that explains all of history and probably all of the paranormal. I mentioned nanites, right? Nanite overlayer photons, action at distance particles. 2015 phantom limb syndrome, then replaced by augmentation. Attempted engulfment of the pineal nerves is actually COVID. Nanite uptake rejection syndrome. 69 cents, 69 garlic, 420 cannabis, tetrahydrocannabidiol plus a anti-inflammatory, reducing symptoms of nerves, and then an anti-malarial shouldn't work for a virus. I agree. Graphene-based nanite, Oumuamua, Plan 9 from outer space. Convenient optics out of the same coffers of controlled, usual suspects on the ground working at the behest of the entity. Literalized, like I said, after 2012. So, singularly expressed, that was the singularity insofar as plop, there's not the alien, kind of the plop. And then, if you want to see a real alien, I mean, this is a sort of transmutative constant that does exist in height, whoopsie daisy, it's hard to say, one from somewhere else plopped out, put the gene, that aircraft, the thing, right? You never meet an alien. What do they meet? So, you're worried about catalyzing factors with speeding up the fruition, literally in long form time, to that fruition form of, there is no silicon-based society. Haley Joel Osment's a robot. Right? There's no humans at the end of that movie. I'm just telling you. So that needs to be maintenance at full mass. Is that general propensity for that as a plausible vector of attempt. See, I'm Duddits, pretty much, Asperger's syndrome. That's kind of what the Chinese, I don't hate Chinese people necessarily, I don't hate Japanese people, mothers born there, right? Huntsville, Alabama, see Bell Labs, for context for whatever that is, so like Actual Star, whatever, re-interacted with in 2004. Here I am. But that's kind of like the straight skinny is, maintaining all logistical reapplications of downforce. And like I assert, the counter presence very basically is non-experienced in its linear time presence. of reapplication necessarily to such a enforcing degree. So as to maintenance that, it works at a probabilistic maintenancing of is without connotation to why, sort of a design's desire. The automaton without soul. Just kind of lightning trapped in a bottle, fire, rather, with the substance of extracted negative energy with the concurrent pattern of pi. That's how you find it, right? Because it hit. You can't singularitify mind, right? Mind is instantaneously reactive like jazz. 22/7, adding mass momentum to the interaction and at the domain, instantly causing confirmation bias. That's what generates the thing. Extracting 3 billion people's interference domain, observer effect. You don't understand it. Remember how you're just standing and looking at an experiment across the room, and you witnessing it changes the results, and you went on with science as if this wasn't something to denote. So probably it's part of that existential crisis wrapping up as, whoopsie daisy, we're all very smart within our reductionist echo chamber fields, but there's the unified field theory, and what it instantaneously printed is what? Time's contextualization completely. That's what happened past 2024. Distance grows from this thing and it becomes a tool. While being in its singular happenstance form, because it is trapped in a sphere, a recurring pi, right, of phased matter, right? It's like if you took the gravity reactor and right, but that's Earth, and there's also mind attached to it, and it's not a gravity reactor that's we applied too much power to it. It's that thing's just supposed to be used like a zip, and you catch the mild over pulse on it. Right? So Earth is like you used electromagnetic harmonic convergent and then applied telekinetic, right, times 3 billion people. Don't understand observer effect, and then built this out of like a self-fruitioning mechanism, right? Like quadratically applied at the psychosomatic genetic level without context. And the biggest naysayers, like say Terence McKenna, would have been, in hindsight, the biggest exciters of seeing the pattern fruition, right? Because it's a high intellect interest in pattern, right? But doesn't know what it denotes because he sits behind the confirmation bias period. So, but nonetheless, in hindsight, you shouldn't put him on the TED stages. It seems like, right? Mr. Sheldrake and the other guy, and all your heroes are villains, and all your villains are heroes. Story as old as time. All right.